Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku controlled the Speed Force better than Barry Allen. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air at the Kinetic Dynamics Research Campus hummed. It wasn't the agitated buzz of a high-voltage power line or the thrum of a city. It was a clean, contained, almost musical hum of potential. Izuku Midoriya, notebook already in hand, felt the vibration in the soles of his regulation red sneakers. To him, it felt like standing on the chest of a sleeping giant. Stay together, class. Shota Aizawa's voice cut through the students' murmurs of awe, his tone as dry and unchanging as the bandages he seemed to perpetually carry. This is a privilege, not a theme park. Any student who causes an incident will be on cleaning duty for a month. Midoriya, that includes spontaneously breaking your own bones. A few nervous titters rippled through Class 1A. Izuku flushed a vibrant scarlet, hastily tucking his pen behind his ear. Why yes, Aizawa-sensei. The KDRC was the bleeding edge of quirk-adjacent support technology. Where Island focused on hero costumes and gadgets, Kinetic Dynamics chased the theoretical. Their lobby was a testament to this, a cavernous white space where holographic displays drifted like jellyfish, showcasing complex equations and schematics for devices that bordered on science fiction. At the center of the atrium, suspended by magnetic containment fields, was a perfect sphere of swirling, silvery energy, a captured micro-tornado, purring like a kitten. It's incredible, Achiko Uraraka breathed, her eyes wide. They're really studying the building blocks of quirks here, a logical and necessary step towards societal advancement. Tenya Ida declared, his arm chopping the air with crisp precision. By understanding the fundamental energies that fuel quirks, we can develop support gear of unparalleled efficiency and safety. TCH. Bunch of nerds showing off, Katsuki Bakugo sneered, hands shoved deep in his pockets. His gaze, however, lingered on the contained tornado with a predatory interest, as if mentally calculating how big an explosion it would take to shatter its containment. Their tour guide was a man who seemed as sleek and futuristic as his surroundings. Dr. Eris Thorne was tall and thin, dressed in a lab coat so white it seemed to generate its own light. His silver hair was swept back, and his eyes, behind thin-rimmed glasses, held the piercing intensity of a man who regularly argued with the laws of physics and occasionally won. Welcome, UA's finest, Dr. Thorne said, his voice smooth and curated. We at KDRC believe that the next great leap for humanity lies not in augmenting quirks, but in understanding the very forces they manipulate. Motion, energy, time, space. He gestured for them to follow, leading them down a corridor where the windows looked out not onto the sunny campus grounds, but into laboratory spaces filled with bizarre and wonderful experiments. One room held a series of pendulums swinging in perfect, eerie unison without any visible mechanism. Another contained a block of tungsten hovering a foot off its pedestal, ripples of distorted air shimmering around it. Izuku was frantically scribbling. Anti-gravity application? Or localized spatial warping? Possible connection to Uraraka-san's quirk but on a macro, non-contact scale. Could it be used for large-scale evacuation? What are the energy requirements? Side effects? All Might, in his gaunt form as Toshinori Yagi, walked beside Aizawa at the back of the group, a small, proud smile on his face as he watched his successor's boundless curiosity. He's in his element, isn't he? He murmured. Aizawa grunted. He's a problem child, but his analytical mind is second to none. Let's hope he analyzes instead of pulverizes today. Their destination was the heart of the facility, the central chamber of the chronokinetic stabilizer. The room was a massive, circular amphitheater, with the central floor dominated by a colossal machine. It was an intricate lattice of chrome rings, copper coils, and crystalline conduits, all aimed at a single point in the center. At that focal point, there was nothing, an empty space that felt colder and heavier than the rest of the room. This, Dr. Thorne announced with the flourish of a master showman, is our magnum opus. The chronokinetic stabilizer. Or CKS for short. What does it do? Momo Yaoyoroza asked, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tried to reverse engineer its design in her mind. A simple question with a universe of complicated answers, Thorne chuckled. In layman's terms, we are attempting to create a stable anchor point in space-time. Most dimensional research involves punching a hole into somewhere else. It's messy, unpredictable, and monumentally dangerous. We are doing the opposite. We are reinforcing a single point in our own dimension, making it so incredibly stable, so fundamentally here, that it acts as a baseline against which we can measure fluctuations across the multiverse. Izuku's pen was a blur. Space-time anchor. Not a gateway, but a foundation. Could be used to predict dimensional rifts or energy influxes from other realities. The potential for disaster prevention is astronomical. But the energy needed to make one point in space more real than others must be. His thoughts were cut short by a deafening alarm. Red light strobed across the white walls, bathing the futuristic chamber in a bloody, urgent glow. A synthesized voice, devoid of panic, echoed through the hall. Containment breach. Unidentified energy signature detected in Sector Gamma. Security teams, engage. Aizawa was instantly in motion, his capture weapon unspooling. Class 1A, defensive formation. Protect the civilians. Yagi-san, get Dr. Thorne to safety. Right. Tashinori said, already guiding the stunned scientist toward a reinforced exit. The chaos was immediate. A wall on the far side of the amphitheater exploded inward, showering the chamber in durasteel shrapnel and plaster. Standing in the jagged hole, wreathed in an aura of sickening, parasitic purple energy, was a man in a tattered tactical suit. Dark, leech-like tendrils of the purple energy writhed from his body, and in his hands he held a device crackling with siphon power. Finally the man rasped, his eyes greedily fixed on the CKS. The biggest battery in the world. This was the villain known as Siphon. His quirk allowed him to drain any energy source, electrical, kinetic, thermal, and absorb it, converting it into raw power for himself. An experimental dimensional generator was the ultimate prize. Ida, Uraraka, get the staff out of here! Izuku shouted, his mind already switching from analyst to hero. Kaken, Todoroki, provide cover. He didn't wait for a reply. A verdant green lightning, the telltale sign of one for all, full cowling, enveloped his body. He kicked off the ground, the floor tiles cracking under the strain, and in the next instant, he was airborne. Black tendrils of energy, black whip, shot from his arms, wrapping around panicking scientists and researchers and yanking them out of the direct line of fire. He used float to hover near the ceiling, coordinating a high-speed evacuation. Below, the battle was joined. Bakugo was a whirlwind of explosions, his AP shots peppering the area around Siphon to force him back. Die, you damn energy vampire! Todoroki was more tactical, sending massive glaciers of ice erupting from the floor, attempting to encase the villain and block his path to the CKS. But Siphon was prepared. He laughed, a raw, grating sound, as he gestured with one hand. The purple tendrils latched onto Todoroki's ice wall, and instead of stopping, the ice began to sublimate, the thermal energy being visibly sucked away until the massive structure crumbled into a cloud of freezing mist. Your attacks only make me stronger, heroes! Siphon crowed. He pointed his device at the CKS, and a thick beam of purple energy shot out, connecting his absorption rig directly to the heart of the machine. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The calm, musical hum of the facility warped into a tortured, discordant scream. The lights didn't just flicker, they died, plunging the room into the hellish red glow of the emergency strobes. The CKS, designed to stabilize reality, began to vibrate violently. The chrome rings shuddered, and the crystalline conduits glowed a furious, unstable orange. He's overloading it! Dr. Thorne yelled from the doorway, his face pale with horror. The feedback loop. It's not designed to handle a parasitic drain of that magnitude. It's going to tear itself apart. From his vantage point, Izuku saw it all. He saw Todoroki's pained expression as the cold was leached from his right side. He saw Bakugo being forced back by the sheer intensity of the energy Siphon was now wielding. He saw his classmates struggling to protect the last of the KDRC staff. And he saw the CKS, the machine meant to be an anchor, becoming a bomb. There was no time for a plan. There was only time for action. Stop the connection. Cut the beam. With a roar that was part determination and part desperation, Izuku deactivated float. He dropped from the ceiling like a stone, green lightning flaring around him. He angled his body, channeling a higher percentage of one for all than he was comfortable with into his legs. He would use a shoot-style kick to sever the villain's rig from the CKS. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was the only way. The world seemed to slow down. He saw the individual sparks of Bakugo's explosions hanging in the air. He saw the fine mist of Todoroki's evaporated ice. He saw the terrified, wide eyes of Siphon as the villain realized what was coming. And then, he saw the rift. It wasn't a hole. It wasn't a tear. It was a wound. In the empty space at the heart of the CKS, where reality was supposed to be at its most absolute, a sliver of wrongness appeared. It was a line of pure, silent blackness that absorbed all light, surrounded by a corona of fractured, rainbow-hued light, like an oil slick on the surface of existence. It lasted for less than a nanosecond, a single, horrifying frame in the movie of reality. But in that nanosecond, something came through. It wasn't an object or a creature. It was pure concept. It was a bolt of lightning unlike any Izuku had ever seen. It wasn't the green, life-filled energy of one for all. It wasn't the violent crackle of an electrical quirk. This was a river of impossible color, molten gold and burning crimson, braided together in a crackling, silent helix. It moved with a sense of ancient, unstoppable purpose. It ignored the machine. It ignored the villain. It leaped from the rift, and shot directly at Izuku. He had no time to dodge, no time to even process what he was seeing. One moment he was a descending comet of green power, his leg cocked back for a devastating kick. The next, the red-gold lightning bolt struck him square in the chest. There was no pain. There was only everything. 1 billion years of running. The birth and death of stars witnessed in a heartbeat. The feeling of every footstep ever taken on every planet in every galaxy, all at once. He felt himself stretched thin across the fabric of time, a single note held for an eternity. The voices of the one for all vestiges, normally a comforting background murmur, screamed in unison, not in pain, but in sheer, overwhelming shock. He felt a new presence, something vast and alive and infinite, a consciousness made of pure motion, wrap itself around his soul and ask a single, silent question. Who are you? And his soul, honest and true to its core, answered without words. I'm a hero. I want to save everyone. The infinite presence seemed to accept this. It flooded into him, not as a parasite, but as a partner, rewriting his biology, supercharging his cells, and meshing with the core of one for all in a way that defied all logic. To everyone else in the room, the event was far simpler. For a split second, a crack of impossible light appeared in the center of the CKS. A bolt of red and gold lightning, impossibly bright, struck Midoriya in midair. The result was an explosion of energy that wasn't destructive, but declarative. A wave of pure kinetic force, tinged with gold and green, erupted from Izuku's body. It didn't harm anyone. It simply pushed. The KDRC staff, Uraraka, and Ida were gently shoved back behind cover. Bakugo and Todoroki were pushed clear of the danger zone. The energy waves slammed into Siphon. The villain's quirk, designed to absorb energy, was suddenly connected to an infinite source. His eyes went wide with terror as his rig didn't just overload, it detonated. The parasitic purple energy surrounding him was violently consumed and annihilated by the golden torrent. He was thrown backward, smoke pouring from his suit, and slammed into the far wall, unconscious before he hit the ground. The chronokinetic stabilizer, its parasitic drain severed and hit with a wave of stabilizing energy, shuddered once and then fell silent, its emergency light switching to a calmer, diagnostic amber. And in the center of the room, Izuku Midoriya hung in the air for a half-second, wreathed in a gentle, fading afterglow of green, gold, and red light. His eyes were wide and unfocused, seeing things that were no longer there. Then, he dropped, falling to the polished floor with the unceremonious thud of a puppet with its strings cut. DKU. Uraraka's scream was the first sound to break the stunned silence. The infirmary at Yui was a place of quiet healing, smelling faintly of antiseptic, and the sugary tea recovery girl always had on hand. For the past 12 hours, however, it had been a hub of tense, baffled activity. Izuku lay on the central bed, still unconscious. He looked peaceful, almost angelic, if not for the array of medical monitors surrounding him, all beeping with readings that made less and less sense the longer one looked at them. Recovery Girl, the venerable youthful heroine, peered at a new printout, her brow furrowed deeper than it had been in decades. "It's impossible," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. "Simply impossible." Toshinori Yagi stood by the window, his skeletal frame looking even more fragile under the weight of his worry. Aizawa was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but his presence a solid, grounding force. "What is it, Chio?" Toshinori asked, his voice raspy. Is he stable? Stable? "My boy, I don't know what he is," Recovery Girl said, slapping the printout onto her desk. "His vitals are perfect. Too perfect. Heart rate is a steady 60 beats per minute, blood pressure is textbook, but that's at a superficial level. Look deeper, and it all falls apart." She pointed to a complex waveform on one of the monitors. It was a constant, low-frequency tremor. His entire cellular structure is in a state of hyperkinetic flux. Every single cell in his body, from his skin to his bones to his brain, is vibrating at a frequency I can't even properly measure. It's not a seizure, it's harmonized. He's vibrating like a tuning fork struck by a god. Aizawa pushed himself off the wall. "And the healing? That's the other impossibility," she said, gesturing to Izuku. "When he was brought in, he had 16 fractured bones. The backlash from whatever that energy release was. Standard procedure for him, unfortunately. I was about to use my quirk, but before I could even get close, they just healed. All of them. In under 5 minutes. Not the slow, quirk-assisted knitting I induce. They snapped back into place as if time was reversing on the injuries themselves. His energy consumption during this process was astronomical, yet his body isn't showing any signs of nutritional deprivation. He's burning fuel faster than a fighter jet, but the tank is somehow always full." Toshinori ran a hand through his unkempt blonde hair. "One for all, could this be another quirk from the vestiges?" "I don't think so," Aizawa said, his sharp gaze fixed on the boy in the bed. The emergence of Black Whip and Float were surprising, but they felt like an extension of what was already there. This was an external event. That bolt of lightning came from the villain's machine, from that rift. It was an outside element. He was struck by something. Struck and rewritten, Recovery Girl added grimly. His DNA is even different. The base pairs are the same, but they're resonating. Vibrating. It's like his entire genetic code has been set to music. I've never seen anything like it. This isn't a quirk as we understand it. This is something new. Something alien." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken fears. The world of quirks was strange and unpredictable, but it had rules, a semi-understandable framework. This felt like a page torn from a book they didn't even know existed. Izuku Midoriya, the boy who had been quirkless, who had inherited the world's greatest power, had now been struck by something from beyond their reality. "All we can do is wait," Toshinori said, his voice barely a whisper. "We wait for him to wake up." The first thing Izuku perceived was not light or sound, but time itself. He was floating in a warm, quiet void, the echoes of a billion-year symphony still ringing in the back of his consciousness. The voices of the vestiges were there, but they were distant, huddled together in a corner of his mind, whispering in awe and confusion. "Did you feel it?" Nana Shimura's voice was filled with wonder. The flow. It was like being part of the ocean, Yoichi Shigaraki, the first, murmured. But there was another presence now, woven into the fabric of One for All. It wasn't a vestige. It had no voice, no face. It was a feeling. The feeling of a clear road on a sunny day. The feeling of a foot pushing off, of wind rushing past, of arriving just in time. It was the pure, distilled concept of motion. Slowly, consciousness returned. It didn't rush in, it trickled. He became aware of the scratchiness of a blanket, the slight pressure on his back. He heard a steady, rhythmic drip. He opened his eyes. The world was slow. Not just slow. It was nearly frozen. He was in the infirmary. He recognized the pale ceiling tiles, the 4 stand next to his bed. The drip he heard was coming from the bag hanging on it. He watched a single, clear drop of fluid gather at the tip of the needle. He watched it swell, elongate, and finally detach. It fell, a perfect, wobbling sphere, on a journey of 6 inches that seemed to take a lifetime. He could count the rotations it made, see the way the faint light from the window refracted through it, creating a tiny, falling rainbow. Plip. The sound, when it finally reached his ears, was a deep, resonant bass note that seemed to shake the room. He turned his head. The movement felt both impossibly fast and perfectly controlled. On the wall, a standard analog clock hung. The second hand was not sweeping. It was crawling. Each tick was an agonizing journey, a microscopic shift forward, followed by a long, long pause. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of his newfound perception. What's happening? Why is everything so slow? He tried to sit up, but his body felt strange, buzzing, humming with a barely contained energy. He felt like a live wire. He pushed himself up with his arms, and the motion was so abrupt he almost flew off the bed. He managed to stop himself, his hands flat on the mattress, his entire body vibrating with a visible tremor. He looked at his hands, and they seemed to blur at the edges, like a photograph taken with a shaky camera. Fear was building now, a roaring crescendo in the silent, slow-motion world. He needed something normal. Something real. A glass of water sat on his bedside table, condensation tracing slow, lazy paths down its side. Thirsty. I'm so thirsty. He reached for it. The thought was simple, the action instinctive. But the result was anything but. His arm shot out, not as a solid limb, but as a vibrating, semi-transparent blur of motion. The humming in his cells intensified, rising in pitch. He felt a bizarre, tingling sensation, a feeling of non-existence, as his blurred hand approached the glass. He focused, trying to grab it, trying to feel the cool, solid surface. But there was no impact. No tactile feedback. His hand passed directly through the glass. For a horrifying, stomach-churning moment, his fingers were intermingled with the glass and the water within it. He didn't feel wetness or coldness or sharpness. He felt nothing, just a void where the object should be. His mind screamed in protest at the violation of every known physical law. His focus shattered. The buzzing in his arm faltered, and his hand became solid again. The sudden rematerialization inside the glass caused it to explode. The sound of shattering glass, in his hyper-aware state, was a cataclysmic boom. The water, freed from its container, didn't splash. It hung in the air in a cloud of 1,000 shimmering, slowly expanding droplets. The shards of glass drifted outward like a lethal, glittering nebula. He scrambled back on the bed, his heart hammering a frantic, allegro rhythm against his ribs while the world around him played a somber adagio. He stared at his hand, then at the suspended catastrophe in the air. He was a ghost. A phantom. What had happened to him? That lightning, that infinite feeling, had it broken him? Had it untethered him from reality itself? He was hyperventilating, his rapid breaths sounding like a hurricane in the stillness. He had to calm down. He had to think. Hero Analysis Notebook for the Future 14. Quirk? Name? Type? His analytical mind, his greatest tool, kicked in as a desperate defense mechanism against the terror. Observation 1. Perception of time is drastically altered. The external world appears to be moving at a fraction of its normal speed. Observation 2. My own body is capable of moving at a velocity that corresponds to my perception. This creates a massive disparity between myself and my environment. Observation 3. At high levels of something, vibration, my body can lose physical cohesion. Phasing. I pass through solid matter. The thoughts were a small comfort, an attempt to cage an incomprehensible monster with words and bullet points. But the fear remained. He felt utterly, terrifyingly alone, trapped in his own personal bubble of accelerated time. It was then that he heard a new sound. Beneath the slow-motion drip of the 4 and the glacial crawl of the clock, there was something else. A hum. No, not a hum. A symphony. It was the sound he'd heard, no, felt, when the lightning bolt had struck him. A deep, universal thrumming, like the heartbeat of reality itself. It was everywhere, a constant, underlying frequency that he had been deaf to his entire life, but could now hear as clear as day. It was the river. The ocean. The endless road. The door to the infirmary began to open. It moved with the agonizing slowness of a glacier. A sliver of light from the hallway widened inch by tortuous inch. A shape began to emerge, a familiar, painfully thin silhouette. It was All Might. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. Relief and a fresh wave of terror washed over him. All Might would know what to do. All Might could fix this. But All Might was a statue. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the handle, his other at his side. His head was turned toward Izuku, a look of gentle concern on his face. But the expression was frozen. A fly, moving with what looked to Izuku like the speed of a bullet, buzzed lazily past the hero's face, and All Might didn't even blink. Then he spoke. Or rather, he began to speak. My boy! The sound was a deep, impossibly drawn-out drone. Each vowel was stretched into an eternity, the vibrations of his vocal cords so slow they were like the groaning of tectonic plates. To Izuku, it was the sound of a record being played at a billionth of its normal speed. He couldn't understand the words, only the distorted, molasses-thick sound. All Might took a step into the room. His foot lifted from the floor with ponderous, dreamlike grace. It moved through the air, seemingly taking minutes to travel inches, before planting itself on the infirmary floor with a low, thunderous thump that echoed in Izuku's ears for an age. The truth crashed down on Izuku with the force of a physical blow. Nothing was wrong with the world. Nothing was wrong with the clock or the four-drip, or All Might. Something was wrong with him. He had been accelerated to a level of existence so far beyond normal that the rest of the world, in comparison, had effectively stopped. The humming in his ears grew louder, the symphony of motion swelling to a crescendo. It was a part of him now, this impossible energy. The red gold lightning hadn't just struck him. It had chosen him. It had made him its avatar. He looked from his own trembling, vibrating hands to the frozen statue of his idol. The greatest hero in the world, the symbol of peace, was standing still, trapped in a moment that Izuku was rapidly leaving behind. He was alone, a castaway on an island of a single, impossibly fast second, and the whole world was the ocean, standing still around him. The terror was absolute. He opened his mouth to scream, but he knew, with a horrifying certainty, that no sound would come out. He was moving too fast for the air to carry it. The world was a photograph, and Izuku Midoriya was the only thing still moving. All Might, his mentor, his idol, stood frozen mid-step, his voice a subsonic drone that vibrated through the floorboards. The shattered remnants of the water glass hung in the air, a silent, glittering testament to his loss of control. Terror, pure and undiluted, was a block of ice in his chest. He was adrift, a man moving so fast that time itself had become the cage. He tried to call out. All Might. The thought was clear in his head, but the execution was a disaster. From his perspective, he formed the words perfectly. From All Might's, it was something else entirely. A sound like a high-frequency chirp, impossibly fast and sharp, shot from Izuku's mouth. It was a single, piercing burst of noise, lasting less than a millisecond, before silence resumed. All Might's frozen expression didn't change. He hadn't even registered it. Of course he hadn't. The sound had come and gone before his brain could even begin to process the signal from his ears. Izuku's panic escalated into a frantic, silent scream. He had to get out. He had to move. He had to escape this horrifying, slow-motion prison. He scrambled to get off the bed, a desperate, jerky motion. His right foot swung over the side, and he tried to plant it on the cool linoleum of the infirmary floor. He felt no impact. His eyes shot down. His foot, buzzing with that same terrible energy as his hand had, was sinking into the floor. Not breaking it, not cracking the tile. It was sinking. The red of his sneaker disappeared, followed by his ankle, as if the floor were made of murky, intangible smoke. The sensation was a nauseating violation of everything he knew to be real. It was the feeling of non-existence, a cold, empty void where solid ground should have been. A strangled gasp, another sound lost to the stillness, escaped his lips. He yanked his leg back with a surge of adrenaline. The motion was explosive. His leg reappeared, and the sheer force of his panic-fueled movement sent him careening off the bed in the opposite direction. His intent was just to get away from the phasing floor. His body, supercharged with an energy it didn't understand, interpreted this as a command for maximum velocity. The world became a nauseating, instantaneous blur. One moment he was by the bed, the next he slammed into the wall on the other side of the room. The impact was jarring, but it wasn't the end of his momentum. His feet, still churning with kinetic fury, found purchase. He didn't fall down, he ran up. The ceiling tiles rushed towards him with dizzying speed. He had a single, horrified thought, "I can't stop," before his head connected with the solid plaster. Crack. The impact was brutal, a flash of white-hot pain that exploded behind his eyes. For a glorious, terrible second, the world seemed to return to normal speed as his body was brought to an abrupt, skull-jarring halt. Then gravity reasserted itself. He peeled off the ceiling and dropped, landing in a heap on the floor with a clatter of limbs. He lay there, groaning, a large, spider-webbing crack now decorating the ceiling above him. The pain, sharp and blinding, was already fading. It receded with an unnatural quickness, the throbbing in his skull lessening, the ache in his neck vanishing. It was the accelerated healing recovery girl had noted, but experiencing it was a fresh horror. The pain was real, the injury was real, but his own body was erasing it in seconds, another sign of how alien his own biology had become. Young Midoriya, All Might's voice, now at a normal, comprehensible speed. Izuku blinked, his vision clearing. All Might and Aizawa were kneeling beside him, their faces etched with deep concern. The world was moving properly again. The clock on the wall was ticking, the floor was dripping. The impact, the shock to his system, must have momentarily disrupted the effect. "Problem child, are you alright?" Aizawa's voice was low and steady, but his eyes were wide, scanning the room, the shattered glass suspended in the air, now finally beginning to fall with a delayed tinkle, the crater in the ceiling, and the trembling boy on the floor. I couldn't control it," Izuku stammered, his voice hoarse. He pushed himself up, every muscle screaming in protest, a phantom ache from injuries that had already healed. The world was so slow. I tried to talk, but it was too fast. I tried to walk, and I fell through the floor. He pointed a trembling finger at the ceiling. And then that. Aizawa's gaze was sharp, analytical. "The energy that struck you. It's given you some form of super speed. A volatile, uncontrolled one." "It's more than that," Izuku whispered, looking at his hands. "It's like I don't exist on the same level as everyone else anymore. I feel like I'm vibrating apart. We need to get you somewhere you can't break anything. Or phase through the planet," Aizawa said, his pragmatism cutting through the fear. He helped Izuku to his feet. The boy was unsteady, swaying as if drunk. Jim Gamma. Now, the journey to Jim Gamma was a lesson in torturous restraint. Aizawa had Izuku hold onto his arm, not for support, but as an anchor. "Focus on my pace," he'd commanded. "Match my steps. Don't think about moving fast. Think about moving with me." It was agony. Every step felt like wading through setting concrete. Izuku had to concentrate with all his might just to walk at a normal human speed, his body screaming to be let loose, to run, to blur. The humming was back, a low thrum in his bones, threatening to crescendo at any moment. They arrived at the vast, configurable training hall. Cementos was already there, having erected a simple, wide-open arena of thick, reinforced concrete at Aizawa's request. The doors sealed shut with a heavy boom, enclosing Izuku, Aizawa, and All Might in the cavernous space. "All right, Midoriya," Aizawa began, his capture weapon hanging loosely around his neck. "Show us what happened in the infirmary." Slowly. "Let the effect happen." Izuku nodded, his mouth dry. He took a deep breath, and as he relaxed his iron-willed control, the world began to desaturate. The vibrant colors of the gym faded into muted grays. The echo of their footsteps stretched into long, drawn-out drones. The humming in his soul grew louder, and the world slowed to a crawl once more. He was back in the cage. He tried to take a single step. He thought one step forward. His body shot forward 10 feet in the blink of an eye, the motion silent and jarring. He stumbled, catching himself before he could fall. Okay, he said, and this time he could hear the high-pitched distortion in his own voice. He tried to slow down his speech, drawing out the syllables. Okay. Thias, eyes, what, peens. To Aizawa and All Might, it sounded like a series of disjointed electronic squeals. Intelligible communication is out, Aizawa noted grimly to All Might. Next, Izuku tried to replicate the phasing. He focused on the buzzing in his hand, letting it build. The vibration intensified until his hand became a transparent, shimmering blur. He cautiously lowered it to the concrete floor. It sank in without resistance, the solid rock parting like water. He pulled it back out, his stomach churning. He was a ghost. A poltergeist in a hero's body. The frustration and fear were building again. He felt useless, dangerous. A failure. He had inherited the greatest power in the world, only to be cursed by another one from beyond the stars. He clenched his fists, the vibration in his body spiking with his agitation. I can't do this. The words were a sonic shriek that echoed strangely in the vast gym. He took a step, a misstep born of anger, and felt his socks suddenly grow hot. He looked down to see a wisp of smoke curling up from his shoe. He yelped and shook his foot, the motion so fast he was a green and white blur. He looked at his sock. A small, blackened scorch mark had appeared on the sole. Friction, All Might breathed, his eyes wide. At those speeds, the friction with the air, with the ground, it should be tearing him apart. Burning him alive. But it isn't, Aizawa countered. It scorched his sock, but not his foot. There must be some kind of aura. A protective field generated by the energy. Izuku heard their words as long, slow rumbles, but he caught the gist. Friction. Aura. More variables. More things he couldn't control. He felt tears of frustration welling in his eyes. He slumped to the ground, pulling his knees to his chest, his whole body a trembling, humming mess. He was a failure. He couldn't control one for all for months, breaking himself over and over. Now this. A power that threatened to unmake him, to vibrate him out of existence, or leave him stranded in a world of statues. And that's when his mind, in a desperate act of self-preservation, did the only thing it knew how to do when faced with an insurmountable problem. It started to analyze. He shut his eyes, ignoring the slow-motion world around him. He ignored the fear, the frustration. He reached into the pocket of his gym pants. Empty. Of course, Aizawa-sensei, he began, trying to speak as slowly as humanly possible, forcing each syllable out. I need a notebook. It took a moment, but Aizawa understood. He walked over, placing a fresh notebook and a pen on the floor in front of Izuku. The gesture was small, but it was an anchor. A piece of normalcy in the chaos. Izuku picked up the pen. His hand was vibrating so much he could barely hold it. He took a deep breath, and then another. He had to ground himself. He opened the notebook to the first page. The crisp, clean paper was a comforting sight. With a shaky hand he wrote the title, Hero Analysis for the Future 15. Then, beneath it, Speed Quirk? Analysis for the Future. He started with the basics, his handwriting a jagged, frantic scrawl. Name, undetermined. Tentatively calling it the flash after the lightning bolt. He scribbled this out. Too presumptuous. Kinetic force? Temporal acceleration? Let's just call it the force for now. Source. Extra-dimensional energy bolt from overloaded KDRC dimensional anchor. Not a latent quirk. An external addition. Core abilities observed. 1. Hyperperception. The world appears to move in extreme slow motion. My own thought processes are accelerated to match. Problem. Causes extreme sensory disconnect and psychological distress. How to turn it off? Is it a passive effect or can it be actively controlled? 2. Cellular oscillation/vibration. My entire body is vibrating at a super high frequency. This seems to be the source of the power. Problem. This state appears to be the default. It's difficult to turn off. The vibration is what allows for 3. Intangibility/phasing. By increasing the cellular vibration, I can pass through solid matter. Problem. Uncontrolled. Happened accidentally due to panic. Feels deeply unnatural. How is mass conserved? Where does my body go? Requires extreme focus to avoid. 4. Superhuman speed, able to move at speeds far exceeding one for all. Ran up a wall. Problem: no control over acceleration or deceleration. Stop and go are like a broken light switch. The world becomes a blur. Risk of catastrophic impact is 100%. 5. Protective aura. Some kind of energy field protects me from the friction of high-speed movement and impacts. Scorched my sock but not my skin. Healed from a major cranial impact in seconds. Observation: the force is self-preserving. It protects its host. But to what end? He paused, staring at the list. It was a list of problems, of dangers. A litany of ways he could fail or hurt someone. He felt the despair creeping back in. He had all this data, but no solution. He was just a kid with a broken superpower. Clench your butt cheeks and yell smash from the bottom of your heart. The memory hit him with the force of a physical blow. All Might's booming voice, echoing across a trash-strewn beach. It had sounded so ridiculous, so simple. But it had been the key. It wasn't about the science of one for all, it was about the feeling. It was about channeling all his will, all his emotion, into a single, focused point. It was about total body control born from singular intent. He hadn't mastered one for all by understanding its mechanics. He had mastered it by making it an extension of his will. Could the same logic apply here? He looked at his list. The core problem was the cellular oscillation. It was the on switch for everything else. He wasn't phasing or running out of control because he was trying to. He was doing it because his base state was a high-frequency vibration, and any strong emotion or unfocused intention sent it spiraling. So, the first step wasn't learning to run. It was learning to stand still. He closed his eyes again. He ignored the hum of the force. He tried to remember what it felt like to be normal. To be solid. He thought about the reassuring weight of his school backpack, the feel of the solid ground under his sneakers after a long day of training, the texture of a cold metal dumbbell in his hand, the warmth of his mother's hand when he was a child. He focused on the sensation of solidity. He didn't just think be solid. He willed it. He dredged up every sensory memory he had of weight, of texture, of presence. He imagined roots growing from the soles of his feet, digging deep into the concrete, anchoring him to the very core of the planet. He wasn't a vibrating phantom. He was a Zucchimidaria. He was here. He was real. Something shifted. The loud, aggressive humming in his bones softened, receding into a gentle, background thrum. The violent tremor in his hands subsided. He opened his eyes. The world was still slow, but it was sharper now. The colors were beginning to bleed back in. He could hear Aizawa and All Might's voices, still distorted, but closer to comprehensible speech. He had found the break. He wrote in his notebook, his hand now steady. Breakthrough 1: the anchor. The vibration isn't an on-off switch. It's a volume dial. It can be turned down. Not through physical effort, but through mental and emotional focus. By concentrating on the concept and feeling of being solid and grounded, I can suppress the phasing. It's a form of meditation. Emotional grounding equals physical grounding. A giddy laugh, still a bit too fast but full of genuine joy, escaped him. He could do this. He could figure this out. Now for the second problem, motion. If standing still required focusing on solidity, what did moving require? He thought back to his disastrous run up the wall. His intent had been vague: get away. The force had filled in the blanks with chaotic, maximum effort energy. It was like yelling drive, in a car without a steering wheel. He needed a steering wheel. He needed a destination. He remembered his training with Gran Torino, bouncing off the walls. The key had been to see the entire path, to plan his next move before he even finished the first. Focus on the why, he thought. All Might's advice wasn't just about the physical. It was about the heroic spirit. Yell smash from the bottom of your heart. The power came from the heart. The why he wanted to be a hero. The why of the movement was the key. He looked across the vast expanse of Gym Gamma. He saw Aizawa and All Might standing near the far wall, watching him. He imagined a scenario. A villain's attack. A collapsing building. His teacher and his mentor are on the other side, in danger. His goal wasn't just run fast. His goal was get to All Might and Aizawa to protect them. He stood up. He took a moment to anchor himself, feeling his weight on the floor. Then, he let that feeling go, just a little. He let the humming rise, the golden-green energy beginning to spark around his feet. He didn't look at the floor in front of him. He looked at his destination. He visualized the path, a straight, clean line across the concrete. He filled his mind not with the mechanics of running, but with the overwhelming, burning desire to be there. I need to be there to help. And then, he ran. There was no thought. There was no conscious effort of putting one foot in front of the other. One moment he was standing by his notebook, and the next, a thunderclap cracked through the gym. It wasn't a blur. He didn't experience the world in slow motion this time. For a single, breathtaking instant, he experienced a perfect, crystalline moment of transit. He was a bolt of lightning, a living concept of motion. He saw the path ahead of him, clear and absolute. Green and gold lightning, brighter and more vibrant than his usual one, for all sparks trailed from his body, crackling with an energy that smelled of ozone and summer storms. The air parted before him with a sound like tearing silk. He crossed the 200 meters of the gym floor in less than a second. His destination was rushing towards him. Now for the hard part, stopping. He couldn't just slam on the brakes. He'd crater the wall, and probably launch himself into orbit. He needed to use the anchor. As he was 10 feet from the wall, he cut the intent. The why was fulfilled. He was here. Now, he needed to be solid. He slammed his mental shields into place, focusing with all his might on the feeling of his sneakers, the texture of the ground, the force of gravity. Stop. Be solid. Be here. The effect was like a parachute deploying. The kinetic energy that propelled him didn't just vanish. It bled off, discharging from his body in a brilliant, harmless flash of light. He skidded the last few feet, carving shallow grooves in the reinforced concrete, and came to a perfect, panting stop a mere 6 inches from Aizawa. Silence. The gym was deathly quiet, the only sound Izuku's ragged, gasping breaths. The golden sparks died down, leaving only the familiar green tracery of One for All. He stood there, legs trembling from the sheer exhilaration and effort, and looked up at his teachers. All Might's jaw was on the floor. His skeletal face, usually gaunt and shadowed, was illuminated by pure, unadulterated shock. He looked from the spot where Izuku had been to where he now stood, and back again, as if his brain was refusing to connect the 2 points. Aizawa's reaction was, in its own way, even more profound. His usual bored, tired expression was gone, replaced by one of wide-eyed, stunned disbelief. His capture weapon had levitated slightly in the static discharge, and he hadn't even noticed. Then, Uraraka's voice came over the intercom from the observation booth, where she and Ida had been brought to watch. Deku-kun! That was incredible. Ida's voice followed, strained and sputtering. The velocity, the instantaneous acceleration, it defies the known principles of kinetic energy and bodily reinforcement. He moved faster than I have ever seen anyone move, including my own brother. His form was chaotic, but the result was flawless. In the background, they could hear the frantic, erratic chopping of his hands. Izuku finally allowed himself a shaky smile. He looked down at his hands. They weren't vibrating. He felt the hum of the force within him, but it was quiet now, a sleeping giant, waiting for his call. He had taken this terrifying, alien power, this monster that threatened to tear him apart, and he had done what he always did. He had analyzed it. He had understood it. And he had taken the first step toward making it his own. Aizawa finally recovered, pinching the bridge of his nose and closing his eyes as if warding off a migraine of cosmic proportions. Good, he said, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a man who just witnessed his student break the sound barrier indoors. You can run without destroying the building. That's a start. He opened his eyes, a look of profound weariness on his face. The paperwork for this is going to be a nightmare. The 2 days following Izuku's breakthrough in Gym Gamma were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. The secret of his new ability was kept under the tightest possible lockdown, known only to himself, Aizawa, All Might, Recovery Girl, and Principal Nizu, who had viewed the security footage with a gleam in his beady eyes that was equal parts scientific curiosity and sheer, unadulterated delight at the unprecedented nature of the problem. Uraraka and Ida were told it was an experimental boost from his existing quirk, a plausible lie that barely satisfied their curiosity. For Izuku, these 2 days were the most intense, frustrating, and exhilarating training camp of his life, all condensed into 48 hours within the stark concrete walls of Gym Gamma. The training began not with running, but with a bowl of katsudon. It sat steaming on a small, steel pedestal in the center of the gym. Aizawa stood 20 feet away, arms crossed, his expression as flat as ever. The goal is simple, Midoriya. Phase your hand through the bowl, touch the bottom. Then pull it out. You will not disturb a single grain of rice. You will not cause a single ripple in the egg. You will not alter its temperature. You will be a ghost. If you fail, I will eat your lunch. Begin. Izuku swallowed hard, the savory aroma of his favorite food a cruel temptation. This was harder than it sounded. Phasing wasn't just about vibrating, it was about control. His first accidental phase had been a panic-induced mess. Now he had to do it with surgical precision. He closed his eyes, taking a deep, calming breath. He reached for the anchor, that feeling of solidity, of being grounded. Then, he gently eased up on it, allowing the universal hum of the force to rise within him, a familiar thrum in his bones. He focused the energy into his right hand, which began to blur at the edges, shimmering like a heat haze. Don't force it, All Might advised from the sidelines, his voice a low, encouraging rumble. Remember your control over one for all. It's not about overwhelming it, it's about guiding it. Izuku nodded. He extended his vibrating hand toward the bowl. He could feel the warmth radiating from it, a ghost of sensation on his intangible skin. He lowered his hand, his focus absolute. He imagined the atoms of the ceramic bowl and the food within it, not as a solid wall, but as a vast, stellar constellation. He wasn't breaking through. He was navigating the empty space between the stars. His fingers touched the surface of the egg. For a split second, his focus wavered. A tiny jolt, born of the instinct that he was about to touch something solid, caused his vibration to stutter. The bowl wobbled violently on its pedestal, and a drop of soy-lace sauce splattered onto the pristine steel. Aizawa's eyebrow twitched. Failure. The katsudon is mine. Wait. One more try, please. Izuku pleaded, pulling his hand back. He was close. He could feel it. The mistake wasn't in the power, but in his mindset. He was still thinking like a person who couldn't phase. He was anticipating the impact. He took another breath, this time not just calming himself, but actively listening. He listened to the hum of the force within him, and he extended that sense outward. He could almost feel the katsudon on a different level. Not its heat or its texture, but its place in the world, the gentle, slow vibration of its own atoms. It was a quiet little pond next to the raging river that was his own body. Don't fight the pond, he thought. Flow around it. He extended his hand again. This time, there was no hesitation. He didn't think about the atoms or the empty space. He simply believed he could pass through. He focused on the feeling of the force, that river of motion, and asked it to part around the bowl. His hand sank into the food. There was no sensation. No heat, no stickiness, no texture. It was a complete and total void of tactile information, a profoundly alien feeling. He could see his shimmering, translucent fingers passing through a piece of pork, moving past individual grains of rice as if they weren't there. He touched the bottom of the ceramic bowl, feeling nothing, and then slowly, carefully, withdrew his hand. He pulled it back into reality, the buzzing fading as he re-established his anchor. He looked at the bowl. It was perfect. Not a grain of rice out of place. The drop of sauce from his first attempt was the only evidence that anything had happened at all. A wide, triumphant grin spread across his face. He had done it. Humph, Aizawa grunted, though Izuku could see the barest hint of impressed surprise in his eyes. Adequate. Eat your lunch. You have 5 minutes. The next test involves projectiles. The katsudon had never tasted so good. 5 minutes later, Izuku stood in a 10-foot circle drawn on the floor. At the far end of the gym, a machine borrowed from the support course, normally used for testing defensive equipment, was aimed at him. This is a ballistic deflection drill, Aizawa explained, holding a remote. The machine will fire projectiles at you. Your goal is to deflect them without leaving the circle. You are not to touch them. You are not to dodge them. Use the power. What kind of projectiles? Izuku asked, stretching his legs. Level 1 tennis balls, Aizawa said, pressing a button. A hatch on the machine hissed open. With a series of rapid-fire thwumps, a volley of a dozen yellow tennis balls shot toward Izuku at over 100 miles per hour. His first instinct was to move, to dodge. But he held his ground. He needed another tool. He remembered the feeling of the air tearing past him when he ran, the sheer force of the wind he generated. He didn't run across the gym. He ran in the circle. He took 2 quick, explosive steps, spinning on the spot. The motion generated a powerful gust of wind, a chaotic, miniature cyclone that buffeted the incoming tennis balls. A few were knocked wildly off course, but others punched through the inconsistent vortex, peppering his legs and chest. They didn't hurt, but they were impacts. He had failed the condition of not being touched. Sloppy, Aizawa called out. You're just moving air. You're not controlling it. Think Midoriya. Don't be a hurricane. Be a scalpel. A scalpel. Izuku slowed to a stop, his mind racing. A hurricane was one big, dumb force. A scalpel was precise. He didn't need one giant vortex. He needed small, controlled ones. He looked at his arms. When he ran, the lightning of the force seemed to cling to them. The energy itself had kinetic potential. What if he didn't need to run in a circle at all? Ready for level 2, Aizawa said, his voice flat. Rubber bullets. Higher velocity, smaller target. Another series of sharp cracks echoed from the machine. A spray of black projectiles shot toward him. This time, Izuku didn't spin. He stood his ground, letting the force hum within him. He watched the bullets, his perception slowing down just enough to track each one individually. As the first one approached, he didn't run. He just moved his right arm in a tight, vicious arc. The effect was immediate. The motion, amplified by the speed force, created a small, incredibly focused whirlwind of air that sprang from his hand. It was a solid-looking cone of spinning wind, a miniature vortex that he could aim. The rubber bullet hit the vortex and was instantly flung upward, ricocheting harmlessly off the ceiling. Another bullet came. He swung his left arm, creating a second vortex. Another deflection. It was like conducting an orchestra of violence. His arms became blurs, painting the air with motion, sculpting the wind into invisible shields. A flick of his wrist here, a sharp jab there. Each movement created a precise, targeted burst of force that met and neutralized an incoming threat. He wasn't just deflecting them, he was dancing with them, weaving a net of controlled air that nothing could penetrate. The last bullet was sent spinning back towards the machine, striking it with a loud thwack. The volley ended. Izuku stood in the center of the circle, breathing steadily, his arms tingling with power. Now that, All Might said, his voice filled with pride, was impressive. Aizawa was silent for a long moment. The level of fine control is unexpected, he finally admitted. The applications for crowd control, for non-lethal takedowns, for defense, it's exponentially more versatile than just running. Izuku was about to thank him when he felt it. It wasn't a sound or a sight. It was a feeling, deep in the core of his being where the force resided. The ever-present hum, the river of motion, had a new sensation. A disturbance. A ripple. Something was moving through the air behind him, fast and silent. It had a weight, a trajectory, a clear intent. It was Aizawa's capture weapon. He didn't turn. He didn't look. There was no time. He simply reacted to the feeling, to the ripple in the river. He whipped his right hand back, his fingers spread, and spun his wrist. A small, tight vortex of air, no bigger than his hand, erupted behind him. The gray fabric of the capture weapon, halfway to ensnaring him, hit the invisible wall of wind. Its momentum was completely arrested, and it was sent spiraling back towards its owner. Aizawa caught it with practiced ease, but his eyes were wide, the surprise on his face genuine and profound. How did you know? Aizawa asked, his voice losing its usual detached tone for a moment. I was in your blind spot. I made no sound. Izuku turned, his own expression one of dawning wonder. I felt it, he said, the words coming out slowly as he tried to process the new sensation. It's the force. I can feel everything that moves. It's like the whole world is a river, and anything with kinetic energy is a current. I could feel your weapon moving through the air. I could feel its speed, its direction. It was like a little eddy in the flow. He looked around the gym, and for the first time, he truly sensed it. He could feel the slow, patient current of cementos reinforcing a wall in another sector. He could feel the frantic, buzzing energy of the lighting fixtures overhead. He could feel the two distinct, powerful currents that were Aizawa and All Might, the steady, coiled readiness of Aizawa, and the faint, flickering ember of One for All that still resided within Toshinori's chest. It was a full 360-degree awareness of motion. A speed-force sense. All Might and Aizawa exchanged a look. This was the true divergence. This was what made Izuku's connection to this power so fundamentally different. He wasn't just using an external power source, he was becoming one with it. It was giving him senses that no quirk registry could ever hope to categorize. Suddenly, their moment of revelation was shattered by a shrill, piercing alarm that blared through the gym's intercom system. It wasn't a drill. Emergency alert. Structural fire reported at the Heights Alliance 3B residential tower. All available HeroCorps staff, report immediately. This is a Level 4 threat, the 3B tower. A new on-campus housing block for general studies and support course students. Aizawa was already moving, his capture weapon coiling around his shoulders. All Might, stay with Midoriya. He's not ready for a live field op. I have to go, Izuku said, his voice firm, the analytical calm replaced by a hero's urgent fire. Aizawa-sensei, I can get there before anyone. I can assess the situation. I can help. Your control is unproven in a chaotic environment. Aizawa shot back. You could be a liability. He's also the only one who can be there seconds ago, All Might interjected, his gaze locked on Izuku. He saw the determination there, the same fire he'd seen on the day they first met. Let him go, Shota, but on a tight leash. Aizawa hesitated for a fraction of a second, his mind clearly weighing the astronomical risk against the potential reward. Fine, he bit out. Reconnaissance only, Midoriya. Get a layout report back. Do not engage. Do not put civilians at risk. Am I clear? Crystal, Izuku said, but his eyes were already distant, focused on his destination. He didn't wait for another word. He pushed off the floor, his body dissolving into a conduit of pure motion. There was a deafening crack of displaced air, a blinding flash of green and gold lightning, and he was gone. Aizawa flinched, raising an arm to shield his eyes. He didn't even hear the clear part, did he? He muttered, his impending headache already making its presence known. The journey from Gym Gamma to the 3B tower took 1.7 seconds. For Izuku, it was a breathtaking streak of color and light. He didn't run on the ground. He ran on the force itself, a living lightning bolt arcing through the UA campus. He arrived to a scene of escalating panic. Thick, black smoke was billowing from the middle floors of the 12-story building. Flames licked greedily from shattered windows on the 6th and 7th floors. Students were fleeing from the main entrance, screaming and coughing, but Izuku's speed force sense told him a more terrifying story. He could feel the hot, angry, expanding current of the fire itself. And worse, he could feel dozens of smaller, frantic, terrified currents inside people, trapped above the blaze. The fire trucks were still just sirens in the distance. There was no time. Aizawa's order, reconnaissance only, echoed in his mind for a millisecond before being utterly consumed by a more powerful, more fundamental command from the core of his soul. Save them. He didn't run in the front door. He ran up the side of the building. The vertical ascent took less than a second. As he ran, his mind, working at 1,000 times normal speed, processed everything. His speed force sense gave him a perfect, real-time schematic of the building's interior. He knew the layout of every apartment, the location of every stairwell. He could feel 47 panicked life signs. 32 were on floors 8 and above, cut off by the fire. 15 were scattered on the burning floors, disoriented by the smoke. The fire's origin was a kitchen on the 6th floor, an explosion from a faulty gas line connected to a support student's experiment. He had all the data. It was time for the solution. He reached the 7th floor. Instead of going in, he began to run, circling the entire building in a horizontal loop. He was a green and gold blur, a living centrifuge. He applied his vortex training, but on a macro scale. He wasn't creating small shields. He was creating massive, targeted vacuums. A nearby student, who had been filming the fire on her phone, screamed and dropped it. Through her screen, and to her naked eye, something impossible was happening. The flames that had been roaring out of the windows were suddenly, violently, being sucked back out, pulled by an unseen force into massive, swirling funnels of fire and smoke that were vented harmlessly into the open air. In seconds, he had created a breathable firebreak. He didn't stop. He shot inside through a now empty window frame, entering the smoke-filled hallway. The air was thick and toxic, but his speed force aura seemed to shimmer around him, creating a pocket of clean air as he moved too fast for the smoke particles to keep up. His sense guided him. 2 students, apartment 7B, passed out from smoke inhalation. He kicked the door off its hinges, no time for phasing, and was inside. He found them on the floor, scooped them both up, one under each arm, and was out of the building and had them on the grass with the other evacuees before they could even register being moved. The entire trip took half a second. To them, it would feel like teleportation. He was back inside. 4 students, 6C, trapped in a bedroom. He phased through the wall, appearing before them as a shimmering, lightning-wreathed apparition. Stairwell B is clear. Go now. His voice was a compressed burst of sound, but the urgency was unmistakable. They stared for a second, then scrambled, his appearance a more effective motivator than any fire alarm. He became a phantom of efficiency. He moved from room to room, a blur of motion and intent. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a solution. He guided the panicked, carried the unconscious, his every action precise and calculated. He cleared the 6th and 7th floors in 4 seconds. Now for the trapped students above. The stairwells were still thick with residual smoke. Too slow. Too dangerous. He ran to the roof. He could feel the 32 students, huddled in apartments and hallways on floors 8 through 11. He took a deep breath. This was going to be the hard part. He ran to the edge of the roof, directly above a group of 10 students clustered by the windows of a common room on the 11th floor. He ran straight off the edge. He fell, but he controlled his descent, using small bursts of wind from his hands and feet to steer. He landed silently on the window ledge, gripping the frame. He phased his head through the glass. Everyone, get against the far wall and hold on to each other tightly. Inside, the students screamed, seeing a boy's head emerge from a solid pane of glass. But the command in his voice, and the sheer impossibility of what they were seeing, spurred them to action. They huddled together, a knot of terrified teenagers. Izuku phased the rest of his body into the room. He moved to the group, wrapping his arms around as many of them as he could. It's going to feel strange, he said, his voice a low hum. Don't let go. He focused, dredging up the memory of the Katsudan, of the void, of the spaces between the stars. He pushed the field outward, extending his own intangibility to encompass the 10 students huddled against him. There was a collective gasp as they felt a bizarre, tingling numbness wash over them. Close your eyes, he commanded, and then he jumped out the window. For a terrifying, heart-stopping half-second, 10 students and 1 hero fell through the open air. Then, with another lurch of non-sensation, they passed through the floor of the 10th story, then the 9th, their bodies intangible. They saw flashes of apartments, of furniture, of terrified faces as they dropped through the building like a stone through water. Finally, they passed through the ground floor and materialized, solid again, in a heap on the grass. Izuku didn't wait. He was a blur, running back up the building to repeat the process. 2 more trips. A group of 12. A final group of 10. He deposited the last group on the lawn just as the first fire engine screamed to a halt 100 yards away. Aizawa, Present Mike, and a handful of other pro-heroes leaped out, ready for battle. They arrived to a scene of profound anticlimax. The fire on the 6th and 7th floors was nothing more than smoldering embers, having been starved of oxygen in a bizarre, unnatural pattern. All 47 students who had been trapped inside were now sitting or standing on the lawn, coughing and dazed, but alive and accounted for. And in the middle of it all stood Izuku Midoriya, his green lightning softly fading, leaving only the steam rising from his overheated costume. He was breathing heavily, the toll of using his power so intensely finally hitting him. The entire rescue, from his arrival to the final phase drop, had taken 9.5 seconds. A firefighter ran up to a dazed support course student. "What happened? Who got you out?" The student just stared at the now smoldering building, his eyes wide. "A lightning bolt," he whispered. "A green and gold lightning bolt. It talked to us. It ran through a wall. It made us ghosts." Aizawa walked slowly toward his student, his face an unreadable mask. He surveyed the scene, the neatly emptied building, the miraculously contained fire, the complete and utter lack of casualties. He looked at Izuku, who met his gaze with a worried, exhausted expression. "I know you said reconnaissance only," Izuku started, wincing. "But I couldn't just..." "Midoriya," Aizawa cut him off, his voice dangerously quiet. He took a deep breath, looking not at Izuku, but at the impossible outcome of the last 10 seconds. He looked at the faces of the students who were alive because his problem child had disobeyed a direct order. All Might arrived, having run the old-fashioned way. He took in the scene, his jaw slackening. He looked at Aizawa, then at Izuku, and he understood. He didn't just save them, Shota, All Might said, his voice a reverent whisper that only Aizawa could hear. He solved the entire disaster. The fire, the evacuation, the smoke inhalation, the structural risk. He addressed every variable simultaneously, before we could even form a plan. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "That's not just a power, young Midoriya. What you just did, in the eyes of those you saved, that was a miracle." Aizawa finally looked back at Izuku, a long, weary sigh escaping his lips. He pinched the bridge of his nose, the full force of a reality-shattering migraine crashing down upon him. "You're on cleaning duty for a month for disobeying orders," he said, his voice flat. He then paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "But good work, problem child. Good work." The aftermath of the 3B Tower incident was a storm of hushed whispers and frantic, classified meetings. To the public and the student body, the official story was a masterclass in heroic misdirection. The rapid response was credited to the combined efforts of several high-speed heroes, with Cementos' quick work and an experimental, wide-area fire suppression system from the support course explaining the rest. It was a flimsy narrative, but it was enough to plug the dam against a flood of impossible questions. Behind the scenes, however, the truth was a ticking bomb. Izuku's 9-second miracle had sent a shockwave through the highest echelons of UA. It was a power signature unlike anything on record. It didn't just register on energy-detecting equipment, it had left a tangible, residual echo in space-time itself. The KDRC, brought in to analyze the now-dormant CKS, reported faint, lingering temporal distortions around the UA campus, all originating from a single, massive energy spike that coincided perfectly with the fire. Izuku Midoriya had become a lighthouse, and his beam was now shining across the shores of the multiverse. It was 2 days after the fire. Izuku was back in Gym Gamma, not for training, but for observation. He sat cross-legged in the center of the vast hall, meditating. He wasn't trying to use the power, he was trying to listen to it. The Speed Force sense, as he had come to call it, was overwhelming. In a bustling campus, it was a cacophony of motion, a million different currents and eddies. He was learning to filter it, to find the quiet space within the storm, to differentiate the hum of a ventilation system from the hurried footsteps of a student late for class. Aizawa and All Might watched from a console on the far side of the room, observing his biometrics on a series of monitors. His heart rate was a placid 45 beats per minute, his brainwave patterns impossibly serene. "He's adapting faster than we can track," Aizawa commented, his voice a low grumble. He went from barely being able to walk to executing a multifaceted, mass evacuation in under a week. "The learning curve isn't a curve, it's a vertical line." "It's his heart, Shota," Toshinori said softly, his gaze on the boy. "He's not trying to conquer the power. He's trying to understand it. To partner with it." That empathy is his greatest strength. It's what allowed him to connect with the vestiges of One for All, and it's what's allowing him to connect with this speed force. As if summoned by the name, a change occurred. The air in the center of Jim Gamma grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and impending rain. The lights flickered. A low electric thrum, different from Izuku's own internal hum, began to fill the space. Izuku's eyes snapped open, his head whipping around. His speed force sense was screaming a warning. A new current had appeared. A massive one. It wasn't approaching from the side. It was welling up from a single point in front of him, like a spring bubbling up from the bedrock of reality. A single, brilliant spark of golden-orange lightning appeared in midair. It hung there for a second, then began to multiply, branching out into a crackling, spherical web of pure energy. The sphere expanded, stabilized, and then the center of it opened, not into a violent tear, but into a smooth, shimmering portal. It was a perfect, humming circle of light that looked out onto somewhere else, a place of endless, roiling red clouds and jagged bolts of golden lightning. What in the Aizawa started, his hand already on his capture weapon. From the swirling portal, a figure emerged. He was a man, tall and lean, clad in a suit of sleek, crimson armor accented with golden lightning bolts. The emblem on his chest was a single, iconic bolt within a white circle. His face was obscured by a cowl, but his jaw was set with a grim, focused intensity. He took a step out of the portal and onto the concrete floor of Gym Gamma, and the portal snapped shut behind him with a sound like a thunderclap. The man stood there, his body crackling with the same golden-orange lightning that had formed the portal. His head turned, scanning the room, before his gaze locked onto Izuku. The white lenses of his cowl narrowed. "I found you," the man said, his voice a low, serious baritone that resonated with power. "You're the source. The anomaly." Aizawa and All Might were instantly in front of Izuku, creating a protective barrier. "Identify yourself," Aizawa demanded, his capture weapon unspooling, his hair beginning to lift as he prepared to activate his quirk. The man in red held up his hands in a gesture of placation, though his stance remained coiled and ready. "My name is Barry Allen. On my Earth, they call me the Flash. I'm a speedster like him." He nodded toward Izuku. "And I'm the one who protects the speed force. I tracked a massive, unscheduled energy surge to this dimensional coordinate. A signature so powerful it was causing temporal ripples across adjacent realities. I'm here to find out who you are, what you've done, and if I need to contain you." Izuku's mind was reeling. Another Earth? Speedster? The Speed Force? It was a deluge of impossible information, yet it resonated with a deep, intuitive truth. This man, the Flash, hummed with the same energy that lived inside him. His current in the river was not just a stream, it was a mighty, raging river of its own. Contain him? All Might said, his voice taking on a dangerously protective edge, even in his skeletal form. "My boy is not a threat. He's a hero who just punched a hole in the multiverse with a power he doesn't understand," Barry retorted, his tone sharp. "I've seen what happens when untrained speedsters lose control. It doesn't just level cities, it can unravel timelines. Entire realities can be erased. I need to know what he can do." Izuku stepped forward, moving past his protectors. "It's okay," he said, his voice steady. "He's not hostile. He's cautious. He's a hero too. I can feel it." He looked directly at the man in the crimson suit. "My name is Izuku Midoriya. The power, it's new to me. It happened in an accident." Barry's posture relaxed slightly, but his gaze remained intense. "New? The kind of power I track takes years, decades to build up. You're generating more raw energy than any speedster I've ever met, myself included." He took a step forward. "I need to see it. I need a gauge of your control." His eyes swept around the massive, empty gym. "This place is big enough. Let's run a friendly race. From one end of this city to the other." He was pointing at the far wall of Gym Gamma, where Cementos, at Aizawa's request, had erected a sprawling, detailed replica of a city block, complete with skyscrapers, streets, and alleyways. It was their standard urban combat training ground. Aizawa looked like he was about to protest, but Izuku nodded. "Okay." This was the only way. To show him, to learn from him. This man knew the name of the power that now defined him. He had answers. The rules are simple, Barry said, his body already starting to vibrate, crackling with golden lightning. We start here. We race through the city, touch the far wall, and race back. First one to cross the starting line wins. Try to keep up. With a final crackle, he was gone. Not in a blur, but with an instantaneous sonic boom that shook the very foundations of the gym. A streak of red and gold lightning shot into the training city, a testament to raw, unrestrained speed. Izuku felt a thrill shoot through him. This was a challenge. He took his stance, just as he had done days ago. He didn't focus on being fast. He focused on his destination, the far wall, and on the why, to prove he was in control. Green and gold lightning erupted around him. With a sound like a thunderclap ripping through silk, he launched forward. He was immediately behind Barry. The man in red was impossibly fast, a blazing comet carving a path down the main street. His movements were pure, refined, a straight line of absolute velocity. He was faster. In a simple drag race, Izuku knew he would lose. Barry had years of experience, years of building up a connection to the speed force. But this wasn't a drag race. It was a city. Barry approached a sharp 90-degree turn. He executed it perfectly, planting his foot on the side of a building, using his momentum to pivot and launch himself down the next street without losing much speed. It was a masterful, practiced maneuver. Izuku didn't bother with the turn. As he approached the corner building, he didn't slow down. He simply let the vibration in his body spike, his form becoming a shimmering, intangible phantom. He passed through the corner of the building, a ghost of green and gold, and emerged on the other side, having cut the corner completely. He was now neck and neck with the Flash. Barry glanced to his side, his white lenses widening in visible shock. Phasing? While running at this speed? How are you? He was cut off as a new obstacle appeared, a series of support pillars for an overpass. Barry began to weave through them, his movements an intricate, high-speed slalom. It was a beautiful display of agility and control. Izuku didn't weave. He saw the pillars not as obstacles, but as tools. As he ran, he swung his arms, creating a series of sharp, focused vortexes. The cones of wind slammed into the street ahead of him, and he used them like springboards, launching himself into the air. He sailed over the pillars, landing on the other side with a ground-shaking boom, now slightly ahead of Barry. Vortex jumps? Barry's voice was strained, a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. Who taught you that? They were approaching the far wall, their goal. But their race had caused collateral damage. The sonic booms and vortexes had shaken loose a large chunk of decorative masonry from the top of a skyscraper. A multi-ton block of concrete was now plummeting towards the street, directly in the path of a holographic family of civilians that was part of the training simulation. Barry saw it. His immediate, heroic instinct was to stop, run up, and vibrate the block to dust. It was the standard, effective speedster solution. It would cost him the race, but it was the right thing to do. Izuku saw it too. But he saw a different solution. He didn't slow down. As he ran, he held out his left hand, focusing his will, not on wind or vibration, but on the very energy that trailed from his body. He remembered his desire to protect, the core tenet of his being. He reached into the speed force, not asking for more speed, but for a shield. He was a hero. He needed to protect people. From his outstretched hand, a stream of solid, crackling green and gold lightning shot forth. It wasn't a projectile, it was a construct. It solidified in midair, forming a flat, translucent, shimmering shield of pure energy directly above the holographic family. The block of concrete slammed into the lightning shield. The shield buckled, groaning under the immense weight, but it held. The concrete block shattered against the construct, breaking into a harmless shower of dust and pebbles. Izuku ran past, tapping the far wall with his right hand. He had fulfilled the first half of the race. He turned to see Barry Allen standing dead still in the middle of the street. The Flash wasn't looking at the wall, or at Izuku. He was staring, with an expression of utter, world-shattering astonishment, at the shimmering green and gold shield that was now slowly dissipating into sparks. A construct, Barry whispered, the sound barely audible over the hum of their combined energy. A solid speed force construct. You created a solid construct. Izuku skidded to a stop a few feet from him, his lightning fading as he anchored himself. I had to protect them, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Wasn't that the right thing to do? The right thing? Kid, that's not a novice technique. That's not an advanced technique. That's a legendary technique. Barry took a step closer, his own lightning fizzling out as his shock overrode his momentum. Speedsters have talked about it for generations. Creating stable, solid objects out of raw speed force. It requires a perfect, symbiotic harmony with the force. A level of intuitive connection that most of us can only dream of. I've been running for over a decade. I can throw lightning, I can create afterimages, but I can't do that. Not like that. Not so instinctively. He looked at Izuku, truly looked at him, and saw not just a powerful anomaly, but a prodigy of impossible proportions. The caution in his eyes was being replaced by a deep, profound awe. How? Barry asked, his voice now quiet, stripped of its earlier authority. How are you doing this? Izuku looked down at his hands, then back at the man who shared his impossible power. I don't know, he admitted, his voice full of a sincerity that was impossible to doubt. I just listen to it, and when I need something I ask. The race was forgotten. The threat of containment was forgotten. In the middle of a simulated city, surrounded by the dust of a shattered concrete block, a new relationship was being forged. Not of a mentor and a potential threat, but of two heroes, standing on opposite sides of an impossible chasm of talent, both trying to understand the lightning that coursed through their veins. The student, in a single, 30-second race, had just shown the master a universe of new possibilities. The first sign of change was the silence. For hours, the only sound from Deku's self-imposed exile had been the frantic, neurotic scratching of his pen, a noise that had set everyone's teeth on edge. It was the sound of panic, of a mind furiously spinning its wheels in a rut of despair. Then, it had stopped. It was replaced by a different kind of scribbling, a calmer, more rhythmic and purposeful sound. Now, that too had faded. In the main nexus of the archive, the atmosphere was thick with a tense, unspoken truce. Captain Roslin still slept, his breathing now deep and even under Aang's spiritual care. Diana stood like a statue, her back to the group, a silent vigil of disapproval. Naruto sat slumped against a crystalline shelf, arms crossed, his fiery anger having cooled into a sullen, brooding silence. Peter had finally reassembled his web shooters and was now idly creating a complex cat's cradle of shimmering web fluid between his fingers, his own form of anxious meditation. It was Aang who looked up first, his head tilted. He felt the shift in Deku's spirit. The storm had passed. The frantic, churning energy had settled into a clear, calm pool. A moment later, Deku emerged from the corridor. The change in him was subtle, yet profound. His shoulders, which had been hunched in a permanent cringe of apology, were now squared. His gaze, previously darting and fearful, was now steady and direct. He wasn't radiating the booming confidence of all might. This was something quieter, something more intrinsic. It was the calm assurance of a craftsman who has finally understood the nature of his tools. He held a new notebook in his hand, not as a shield, but as a charter. He walked into the center of the nexus and stopped. He didn't apologize. He didn't make excuses. He simply waited, his quiet presence demanding their attention more effectively than any shouted command ever could. One by one, they turned to look at him. Peter's web fiddling ceased. Naruto's sullen glare softened into curiosity. Diana, after a long moment, finally turned from her vigil, her arms crossed, her expression one of stern neutrality. Deku met their gazes, each in turn. I was wrong, he said, his voice clear and even. It didn't hold the tremor of fear or the false bravado from before. It was just a statement of fact. I tried to be a leader you didn't need, and I gave you a plan that didn't respect who you are. I treated you like pieces on a board. I failed. And the world paid the price for my mistake. I can't undo that, but I can learn from it. He opened the new notebook. The librarian told me to lead with empathy and analysis. I only focused on the analysis of power. I forgot the empathy. I forgot to analyze the most important part of any hero, their heart. He looked directly at Naruto. I'm not going to give orders anymore, he said. I'm going to ask for help. And I need to start by understanding. His gaze was so earnest, so devoid of ego, that Naruto found his own anger deflating completely, replaced by a grudging respect. This wasn't the same terrified kid from before. Naruto, Deku said, taking a step toward him. I need you to teach me. I need to understand your way of fighting. Not just the jutsu, but the philosophy behind it. I need you to spar with me. Naruto blinked, taken aback. He had expected more apologies, more frantic plans. He had not expected a challenge. A genuine, almost academic curiosity radiated from the green-haired kid. A slow grin, the first one in hours, spread across his face. Ha! You want to spar with me? He said, hopping to his feet and stretching theatrically. You sure about that? I'm the 7th Hokage. I don't go easy on anyone. I'm not asking you to. Deku replied, his expression serious. I need to see you at your best. Aang smiled softly. The first thread was being woven. The sparring match took place in a vast, empty chamber that the archive seemed to conjure for them. A blank white space that stretched to an infinite horizon. Ready, believe it! Naruto shouted, already a blur of motion. He didn't start with a single punch. He started with 100. Shadow Clone Jutsu! The empty chamber was instantly filled with a sea of orange jumpsuits and confident grins. Deku found himself at the center of a whirlwind, 100 Narutos all charging him at once. His first instinct, the All Might instinct, was to meet force with force. A 15% Detroit smash would clear the area, scatter them like bowling pins. But that wasn't the point of this exercise. He wasn't here to win. He was here to learn. He activated full cowling, green lightning crackling around him, and focused. He didn't punch. He dodged. He weaved through the first wave, his mind a whirlwind of analysis. They aren't attacking randomly. There's a pattern. A pincer movement. Some are feinting, drawing my attention, while others are striking from my blind spots. It looks like chaos, but it's coordinated chaos. A Naruto clone appeared in front of him, a swirling Rasengan in its hand. Deku dropped, sliding under the attack, and used the momentum to kick the legs out from under another clone. He pushed off the floor, using a flicker of FA gene, and vaulted over a third. Not bad, Deku! The chorus of Narutos shouted. But you can't dodge forever! They were right. He was being herded. They were systematically shrinking his space, their movements a complex, fluid net that was slowly tightening around him. This wasn't a mob. This was a single, 100-bodied organism. He remembered his notes. Thrives in chaos he creates. Naruto wasn't just causing chaos. He was the conductor of it. He was a master of misdirection on a grand scale. The idiot routine, the loud proclamations, it was all part of the jutsu, a psychological feint to make you underestimate the tactical genius at work. Deku needed to break the rhythm. He couldn't outdodge 100 opponents. But maybe he could disrupt the conductor. He spotted the real Naruto standing at the edge of the clone army, his arms crossed, a focused glint in his eye. He was the source, the central processing unit for this entire beautiful mess. Deku stopped dodging. He planted his feet. A dozen clones converged on him. Just before they struck, he fired a single, thin strand of black whip. It wasn't aimed at any of the clones. It shot past them, a black thread in the white void, and wrapped around the real Naruto's ankle. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Deku yanked hard. The real Naruto was pulled off his feet, his concentration broken for a split second. In that instant, every single shadow clone wavered, their movements becoming clumsy and uncoordinated. The hive mind had been momentarily disconnected. It was the opening Deku needed. He didn't attack. He pushed off the ground, a 20% smash aimed at the floor, launching himself high into the air. He landed beside the now upright but still surprised Naruto. The clones dissipated in puffs of smoke. The chamber was silent. Naruto stared at him, a look of genuine shock on his face. Then, he burst into laughter. A loud, booming, unrestrained laugh that echoed in the empty space. Ha ha! You got me! He roared, slapping Deku on the back so hard the boy stumbled. You didn't go for the clones, you went for the original. You figured it out. You're not just a bookworm, you're a sneaky bookworm. I like it, Deku grinned, a real, relieved grin. I understand now, he said, catching his breath. Your clones aren't just an army. They're a sensory net. You feel what they feel, you see what they see. You fight like you're playing 100 games of chess at once. Exactly! Naruto beamed. And my real strength, he added, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious, is that I'd let every single one of those clones get destroyed if it meant protecting someone important. That's the real trick. You give the enemy 1,000,000 targets, but only one of them actually matters. Deku's eyes widened as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Give him a person to protect. That was it. That was the key. He grabbed his notebook, which he'd set aside, and furiously scribbled a new note. Naruto's clones are not the weapon. They are the shield for the true objective. He looked up at Naruto, a new level of respect in his eyes. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Naruto waved a hand dismissively, though he puffed his chest out a bit at the formal title. Just Naruto is fine. And hey, that black whip stuff is pretty cool. We should try combining it with a Rasen shuriken sometime. The second thread was woven. Tighter this time. Deku's next stop was Diana. He found her in a chamber simulating the night sky, where she was practicing her forms, her god-killer sword a silver whisper in the starlight. She moved with a grace and precision that was both beautiful and terrifying. Each swing, each parry, held the weight of millennia. She stopped as he approached, her expression still cool, but the hard edge of her disapproval had softened. She had watched the spar with Naruto. Princess Diana, Deku began, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of sincere respect. I apologize for my tactical error. I gave you the role of a sentry, when you are a champion. Diana raised an eyebrow. Go on, I need to understand your strategy, Deku said, notebook in hand. Not just how you fight, but why you fight the way you do. You are a general. I need a lesson in the art of war. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Diana's lips. This was a language she understood. She was not being asked to follow a foolish boy. She was being consulted by a student of strategy, an apprentice commander. The art of war is not about overwhelming force, Izuku Midoriya, she began, her voice taking on the tone of a master instructing a pupil. It is about applying the right force at the right moment. A battle is a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The key is to control the narrative. She gestured for him to stand opposite her. She didn't offer him a weapon. Show me your defensive stance. Deku adopted the basic defensive posture he'd learned at UA. It was solid, practical, designed to mitigate damage. Diana shook her head. That is the stance of a brawler. It is a stance that says, hit me, I can take it. An Amazon's stance says, hit me, and you will regret it. She corrected his footing, shifted his balance. Your power is immense, but you hold it back, bleeding it out in percentages. You fear it. An Amazon does not fear her strength. She hones it into a perfect, killing edge. Not an edge of malice, but of justice. A force so absolute it ends the conflict swiftly, she demonstrated. She moved through a series of attacks, and her shield was not just a defensive tool. It was a weapon. She used it to parry, but the parry flowed into a bash that would break bones. She used it to block, but the block was a platform to launch a kick. Her sword and shield were not two separate items. They were two parts of a single, fluid concept of battle. Your black whip, she said, her eyes glinting with tactical insight. You use it to restrain, to pull. You think like a constable. Think like a warrior. It can be a snare, yes. But it can also be a feint, a distraction. Force the enemy to look at your left hand, while your right hand delivers the true blow. Deku absorbed it all, his mind racing, his pen flying across the page. He was learning the ancient, brutal ballet of Amazonian warfare. It was about decisive action, about identifying the enemy's linchpin, their commander, their power source, their morale, and shattering it with one perfect, overwhelming strike. Ethelgard, Diana said, her voice dropping, was lost because we fought a battle of attrition. We swatted at the flies instead of killing the beast that was spawning them. A true commander would have identified the source of the echoes and struck it directly. Deku's blood ran cold. She was right. He had been so focused on the symptoms, the fighters, the ship's engine, that he never even considered the disease. How? He asked, his voice a whisper. How would you have found it? You look for the heart, she said simply. Every army has one. You observe the flow of battle. Where do the reinforcements come from? Where do their eyes turn for orders? What is the one target they protect above all others? You find that, and you commit everything to its destruction. It is a gamble, but decisive victory is always a gamble. That is the burden of command. Deku stared at her, a profound understanding dawning. He had treated her like a shield when he should have been using her as a scalpel. He had asked her to hold the line, when he should have asked her to lead the charge. Your heart is in the right place, Izuku Midoriya, Diana concluded, her voice softer now, the lesson over. You wish to save everyone. It is a noble sentiment, but the role of a general is often to make the choice of who must be sacrificed so that more may be saved. It is a terrible calculus. Do not seek it lightly. He bowed again, deeper this time. Thank you, General, the third thread. Forged in the cold, hard logic of war, and tempered with mutual respect, he found Peter in a simulated New York City, a place of impossible skyscrapers and bustling, noisy streets conjured by the archive's power. Spider-Man was perched atop the Chrysler Building, looking out over the city that was and wasn't his home. Quite a view, huh? Peter said as Deku landed silently beside him. Smells better than the real thing. Less hot dogs and existential dread. Deku smiled. I needed to talk to you. About your webs. My webs? Peter tilted his head. Secret formula, kid. Patented. Can't have every Yahoo swinging around the city. The traffic is bad enough, not the formula, Deku said, pulling out his notebook. The application. In Ethelgard, you were limited. No anchor points. My plan failed to account for your environment. Peter's light-hearted demeanor softened. He appreciated that. The kid was admitting his mistake, not just apologizing for it. Yeah, open sky combat isn't really my jam, he admitted. I'm more of a concrete canyon kind of guy. Give me an alleyway and I'm a genius. Give me a cloudy day and I'm just a guy in spandex falling with style. So I was thinking, Deku said, his muttering habit kicking in as he started sketching in his notebook. What if we make the anchor points? Your webs are incredibly strong, right? And fast-acting. Naruto's clones can move at high speeds. What if a clone, or Aang, could carry a web line across a battlefield and anchor it to something, creating a temporary web for you to swing from? Or what if Diana could throw a web cartridge like a javelin to create a distant anchor point? We could build your web for you. Peter went silent. His mask's lenses widened. He stared at the frantic sketches Deku was making, diagrams of clones creating a crisscrossing web matrix in midair, of Aang using air currents to guide web lines into place. Kid, Peter said slowly, a note of genuine awe in his voice. That's brilliant. You're talking about turning me into an aerial superiority fighter, building a temporary, three-dimensional web in the middle of a battle. The level of coordination required would be insane. But it's possible, right? Deku asked, looking up, his eyes bright with excitement. Possible? Yeah. It's possible, Peter said, a slow grin spreading under his mask. He looked at Deku with a new understanding. This kid's brain didn't just analyze, it innovated. It connected dots no one else saw. You're not just a fanboy, are you? You're an engineer. I just like seeing how things work. Deku mumbled, a blush creeping up his neck. There's more, Peter said, getting into it now, his own brilliant, scientific mind firing up. My webs can do more than just swing. Impact webbing for non-lethal takedowns. Trip mines. I even have an electric web formula that could probably stun those echo things. But I need time to set them up. I need a safe perimeter. Diana can create that perimeter, Deku said instantly. And Naruto's clones can act as decoys, drawing the enemy into your traps. They spent the next hour talking, a rapid-fire exchange of ideas. Deku learned about Peter's spider sense, the danger warning system that made him so hard to hit. He learned about his unwavering moral code, the absolute refusal to take a life, a rule born from the searing pain of his greatest failure. He learned about the promise to Uncle Ben, the ghost that didn't crush Peter, but instead lifted him up, the bedrock of his entire heroic identity. Responsibility, Peter said, his voice quiet as he stared out at the city. That's the whole gig. You get the power, you get the responsibility. All of it. The wins, the losses, the people you save, and the ones you can't. You can't let the losses break you. You get up, you put the mask back on, and you try to do better tomorrow. He looked at Deku, his mask's lenses reflecting the city lights. You get that, kid? I can see it. You've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Just make sure you bend your knees, or it'll crush you. Deku nodded, absorbing the simple, profound wisdom. He wasn't just learning about a hero. He was learning about a man. A good man trying his best, the fourth thread. Woven from innovation, respect, and the shared burden of responsibility. The last person he sought out was Aang. He found him not in a simulation, but back in the main nexus of the archive, meditating before a crystal book that showed a peaceful, sun-drenched valley where sky bison lazily floated. Deku sat down quietly, a respectful distance away, and waited. He didn't need to ask Aang about his powers. He understood airbending, he understood the avatar state. What he needed to understand was the soul behind it. After a few minutes, Aang opened his eyes and smiled. You have been busy, Izuku. I've been listening, Deku corrected gently. Aang, in Ethelgard I gave you the worst possible job. I asked you to fight an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with, using methods that were designed to de-escalate. It was a contradiction, and I put you in the middle of it. The river cannot flow through solid rock, Aang replied calmly. It must flow around it. I was trying to stop the rock. That was my mistake as much as yours, but that's your philosophy, isn't it? Deku asked, genuinely curious. To find the path of least resistance. To use your opponent's energy against them. But what do you do when your opponent has no energy? The null is a void. Silence. Emptiness. It's like trying to redirect. Nothing. Aang grew pensive, his gaze turning to the peaceful scene in the crystal. That is a question I have been meditating on since we arrived. My entire life has been about seeking balance, but the null does not want balance. It wants to erase the scales entirely. How do you balance something against nothing? They sat in silence for a long moment, contemplating the impossible philosophical problem. Maybe, Deku said slowly, thinking aloud. Maybe the answer isn't to redirect the nothing. Maybe it's to fill it. Aang's eyes widened slightly. The null is silence, Deku continued, the idea taking shape in his mind. So we fight it with sound. It's emptiness, so we fight it with substance. It's despair, so we fight it with hope. Your pacifism, it's not a weakness against them. It's a challenge to find a weapon they can't comprehend. You don't have to hurt them. You have to overwhelm them with life. He looked at Aang, his eyes shining. What if your role isn't crowd control? What if your role is to be the heart of our spiritual defense? While we fight their bodies, you fight their concept. You project peace, life, balance, not to defeat them, but to remind them of what they are trying to erase. You are the anti-null. Aang stared at Deku, a look of profound revelation on his face. He had been trying to apply old solutions to a new problem. He had been trying to bend an element that didn't exist. Deku, with his empathetic analysis, had just handed him a new form of bending. Bending the very concept of the battle, to overwhelm them with life. Aang whispered, the words resonating deep within his spirit. He looked at Deku, and for the first time, he saw not just a successor, not just a boy with potential, but a true spiritual peer. A soul who understood the deepest fundamentals of the cosmic struggle they were in. You see beyond the physical fight, Izuku, Aang said, his voice filled with a quiet awe. That is a wisdom that takes most lifetimes to learn, the final thread. The strongest of them all. Woven not from power or strategy, but from a shared, fundamental understanding of the nature of their war. Deku returned to the center of the nexus. The atmosphere had completely transformed. Naruto was excitedly explaining the concept of a tailed beast bomb to a fascinated Peter, who was frantically sketching designs for a containment device. Diana was no longer standing apart, but was watching them, a small, amused smile on her face. Aang radiated a newfound sense of peaceful purpose. They all turned as Deku approached. He opened his notebook, its pages now filled not with desperate equations, but with a blueprint for a team. "I have a new plan," he said, and this time, his voice held the quiet confidence of a man who knew his business. "It's not an order. It's a theory. A symphony. And it only works if we all play our part." He laid it out for them. Not a rigid set of commands, but a fluid, adaptive strategy built on enabling each other's strengths. "We don't fight in zones," he explained. "We fight in pairs and trios, constantly shifting. Naruto, you are no longer just interference. You are Peter's mobility. You are Diana's shield. Your clones create the battlefield that Peter needs, and they absorb the blows that Diana cannot afford to take while she lines up her decisive strike." He turned to Peter. "You are not just takedowns. You are the controller. You lay the traps, you create the choke points, you dictate the enemy's movement. You and Naruto together are a spider and 100 hands building his web." He looked at Diana. "You are not a wall. You are the executioner. Peter and Naruto create the opening. Aang protects you from spiritual or conceptual attacks, but when the moment comes, you are the one who strikes the heart. Your target is singular. The rest of us exist only to get you to it." Finally, he looked at Aang. "And you, Aang, are our soul. You are not on crowd control. You are on conceptual defense. You will be the calm at the center of our storm, a bubble of life and peace that the null's despair cannot penetrate. You will keep our minds clear and our hopes strong." He paused, looking at each of them. "And me? I'm the nervous system. I'm the analyst in the field. I'll use my mobility to move between you all, relaying information, spotting weaknesses, and using one for all as the final, blunt instrument when we need it. I'm not the leader. I'm the support." He finished, his heart pounding, and waited for their judgment. It was Naruto who spoke first. He walked up to Deku, a massive, brilliant grin on his face. He didn't say anything. He just held out his fist. Deku stared at it for a second, then a slow smile spread across his own face. He bumped Naruto's fist with his own. "It is a strategy of profound synergy," Diana said, a nod of clear, unequivocal approval. "It is unorthodox. But it is wise. I get to have 100 ninjas build a giant web for me in the sky." Peter chirped, practically vibrating with excitement. "Kid, you are officially the best boss I have ever had, and I've worked for a guy who turned into a giant lizard." He was not big on creative input. Aang simply bowed, his eyes shining with respect. "I will be honored to be our hope, Izuku." The team was no longer a collection of disparate legends. It was a single weapon, forged from 5 unique metals, finally fused into a whole. In the heart of the infinite library, surrounded by the stories of heroes past, a new one had just been written. And as Deku closed his notebook, he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that they were finally ready for their next chapter.